Emily, are you in the channel? Can you make sure they can hear and see all that sort of stuff?
No Joe? Not that Joe.
Yeah, other Joe.
You're not real.
No, the sanity checking Joe.
Okay. All right, let's go ahead and get started. This is our impromptu, last minute, but very well received session here that Cody's going to be providing for us. We appreciate that. Hopefully this will be the one that jump starts us back into a more regular, routine like we had before. We went out, I think before the holidays actually. Before the holidays is when we kind of broke up our routine, but we're hoping to get back into it. So today Cody's going to be, what's your topic again, Cody? It's like
lessons learned from stalking a hacker for a year.
Yeah, which is a very good title.
Or Marston's Academy, year one.
Yes. Yeah. After that, next week, what we have planned is Damon Chandler is going to be giving a talk on the basics of administering Linux, which is, I'm really looking forward to that. I believe we will finally have our UI UX for AR VR the week after that. So we'll have probably 3 consecutive weeks, if not 4 consecutive weeks of Dev Group. Part of the reason why we don't have pizza today is because we're going to have 3 or 4 consecutive weeks of Dev Group. So I don't want them to be pissed off at me. So, and it was kind of hard to get it set up last minute. So with that, we may have some technical difficulties for those that are in the recording. We're going to try to do our best for you guys, but it may or may not work. So please bear with us. If you are having problems in the channel and online, please shoot us a message in Slack and we'll try to adjust as best we can. Okay. With that, I think that's it for me, and we'll let Cody take it over in just 1 second here.
How do you screen share on this?
Yeah, the little green guy there on the left hand side. Yep, there you go.
Entire screen. Sure. Nice. Okay. Okay, so let's.
Well, that's his.
Yep, so it's going to be
You want me to?
And this is the actual stream?
Yep.
Okay. So, there's quite a bit that I'm going to actually be demonstrating in this actual tutorial, but I just wanted to do a quick rundown on some of the tools that are actually going to be used. These are just various things that I really didn't know about and wouldn't have come by if I just stayed within my little developer circles. Kali Linux, I'd always avoided it because Ubuntu was just sort of the way to do things automatically, so I didn't really care. And then I realized that all of the people who actually write drivers write Kali Linux, so all of the stuff is way more supported. Pushty-popty, it's just a CD alternative. I'll be doing a lot of that later. Stop doing PS grep because there's a built-in pkill and pgrep, as well as multi-tail replacing tail, variations of top that actually tell you more information than just what is eating up a little bit of CPU. Fgrep is just grep without any regex, and you wind up getting a good magnitude of speed out of that thing. Auto SSH, most of the connections that I do from server to server, I actually do it over auto SSH, so I don't have to worry about actual crypto for each of the applications with the SSL layers, since this is mostly just backend traffic. So the tools that kind of open new doors. Task set is a tool that's kind of used to lock processes onto specific CPU cores, so you can do a lot more with what little CPU you actually have. strace is pretty much your free code debugger if you don't want to write more code. So sometimes we'll actually be debugging connections, and I realized that I could have just been using strace this whole time and just known exactly what server it was actually coughing up on. Perf, that is pretty much this deep inspection tool where it watches the execution of the actual process and shows you where your process is wasting most of its time. So say you have too many threads or something like that, it'll show you, hey, you're wasting most of your time just switching tasks. You aren't actually doing any work. Ent is a tool that looks at a file and will show you how good the randomness actually is. This is really useful for when you're on some server and you actually want to know whether or not the crypto is going to be difficult to crack if your random number generator is being taken up by other VMs on that box. Your entropy from that server is going to be really, really poor. So it's going to be easy to crack. PV stands for pipe view. That is pretty much the way to measure the speed of live streams. So like in Bash, how we sort of pipe to each tool, you can put that between them and see the actual bandwidth going between the two. LSOF, technically for Linux, everything is a file. It doesn't matter if it's the network connections, doesn't matter if it's the actual system stats, everything can be sort of looked at on the actual file system. And LSOF shows you all the files that each process is actually working with. So it's really good at just sort of shortcutting through and seeing, okay, what is this box actually listening on? What is exposed right now? SS was a weird one. I didn't really know what to do with it for a long time. It was a tool that shows you statistics about sockets. And what that actually winds up being important for is if you're ever trying to do high performance networking, that'll just kind of start spitting out exactly what's being maxed out and where you could actually use some wiggle room. Netstat is how you sort of track, well, how I've been tracking network connections when I don't have root access. And that's been more of a way to see what do I have access to, even though I'm a low privilege user. And it can also be used for watching live connections come through to the actual server. IP is a pretty common one, but no one other than network engineers really use it, that I've seen at least. And that has been my secret weapon for anti-DDoS, because most of the time developers think, okay, let's just go ahead and load balance the shit out of this thing until we can actually handle that load. Thing is, though, you can actually just null route those attacking IP addresses, and your servers don't care that they're trying to call up. The traffic will just be dropped before it even gets to your server, and you won't have to deal with that anymore. So that's a basic rundown of the tools that we'll be doing. Let's see. All right. System's always talking to you. This was one thing that kind of took me a while to figure out. Let's see, my term. By the way, we're doing this all live. I have zero prep. Multi-tail. Let's see. Fine, whatever. So the nice thing about this, if you guys have ever used Tail before, is it actually lets you watch multiple things at a time. So system log, let's just do star.log. And it'll actually let you watch multiple things, play out actual brackets, and you can just sort of see when various things move. I've spent God knows how many hours trying to glue together this myself, and then once I saw this, I was like, oh, okay, this is already solved, so I should probably stop doing this. This is probably one of the first things that I always install now. Let's see. One of the big misconceptions that I kind of had when I was walking into this actual job was trying to prevent logging for various user privacy reasons. But what I didn't really realize was most of that stuff can already be sniffed on the system. So I'm only shooting myself in the foot by not actually logging messages. And yeah, ever since I actually made that change, that has helped dramatically. I was hoping that we would actually have a Linux system on here, but I don't want to cut the stream, so.
Me too. I can just point my thing at the screen.
Okay.
That's the screen.
Yep.
It's all up to you.
Yeah, we can do that.
Actually, you just point yours at the screen.
So would a multi-tail handle the rewrite rules from like HTTP to HTTPS?
Actually, you know what? Screw this. I'm going to do this all in Docker. Okay.
There you go.
All right.
To the rescue.
Docker?
Yes. Okay, so where were we with this? What was the question about multi-tail?
Well, in handling the redirects when we were working on HTTP.
So he's wondering, so we have a rewrite log that shows here's the HTTP access, and separately here's the HTTPS access. He's thinking we can say multi-tail and watch things happen and watch redirects occur and see what happens in each log as things are occurring. Which, yes, we can and should do that. Thank you, Cody.
Yeah, actually, that's a pretty good segue to the, where is that? Guess we'll do that live too. All right. Yeah, why not? That needs to be privileged. There you are. So this was one of the actual things that we had run into last week where a couple teams were running some Docker containers and they didn't really understand why SSL connections weren't going through. And what I wound up doing is, let's see. So as this just shows all of the actual processes. This shell is actually this little Alpine container down here. I had it share the PID space of the actual tracer. So if we do strace P, I think, and 57. 57. Okay, Google we go. There you are. Oh yeah, okay.
I love that you did that and just recorded for us in the video. A lot of times you have these training videos and everyone's just running through things and everyone expects it to have all the stuff in your head.
Yeah, no, I honestly don't at all. So just to test that it actually works on this side before I start doing cross container. Oh, whoops. Okay, so was it sock? Was it read? Which one was it? Con open socket connect. Okay. So I know that, or that's what you are. Oh, whoops. Bad. I actually forgot that trace by default logs to standard error. To and one, I think. There we go. So that's kind of how you actually track all of the IP addresses that actual command is trying to get to. So wrap PID. Oh, yeah, it was them. I think it's F stands for follow all child processes. So we're going to follow all of the child processes of the capital F. All F works.
There's a dash double F.
Yeah, no, it was snowing when I was coming in.
It's supposed to sound today.
Yeah, but it's going to be like in the 60s on Sunday.
No, it would be crazier if it was going to be 60s in the afternoon.
That's true. That would be crazy.
Which we did have about 2 weeks ago. Yeah. Snowed in the morning and it was nice in the afternoon. Here's one here.
As you're looking for this, and anyone can answer this, but how do you amass your knowledge of this environment? One of the things, like I said, next week we're doing a basics of Linux because I'm not a Linux person, nor do I play one on TV. How do you amass your knowledge of how these things work and how to connect things?
That's kind of a tricky one because it's really just spitballing. Most of the sysadmins that haven't been in the field for long enough that they can pretend like they haven't, most of them are just kind of trying over and over and over until they actually get something actually going. Actually, that's kind of one of the things that we wanted to go through. See, aren't we doing that now? Install dish. Gonna have dish. PL release. So one of the things that really helped me with all this was finding a tool that would sort of live teach me as I go. So one of the things, update completions. Phrase dash Tucker's fighting with it. Anyway, what I was trying to get to was this, where we actually have auto completion of the options of the tools that come in, and this has been phenomenally useful.
That's fish.
Yes. So tar, the frickin' thing that we just never actually remember. You actually have a full directory of all this stuff immediately.
It's great.
I think some servers are going to get.
Any sysadmin that argues that this is too far away from Bash, anytime that I've actually had them look into it, it's probably only 2 or 3 characters away from native Bash. They got rid of the $, and that's about it. Everything else works the exact same. It is just a Python library on top of Bash, and it works fantastically.
Interesting.
Let's see. Auto SSH. Actually, yeah.
No, actually, I have one for you before. You said the bin bash was the actual Docker image, which you said
Bin Bash.
when you did the list of all the processes.
Oh yes, yeah.
So everything's a file. So one of your options, auto SSH was at the bottom, but one of the other ones allowed you to find out everything about what was connected in that. I was wondering what would happen if you actually connected to that bash.
Yeah, so you're not actually running in a bash shell, you're running in a Python shell.
So this right here, this is just a CentOS container.
Before.
Am I still on fish?
Well, no, not right now.
Yeah, if you're running fish, you would
If you're
be
running fish,
sitting in a Python.
Library.
Yeah.
So the commands are actually retranslated down to shell script.
Okay.
So you're not in an active Python thing. So if you just run kill all Python, you're not going to kill your shell.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But the shell itself is still a Python shell.
No.
Okay.
No. It's sort of like running Python dash E and then just whatever, print hello world, and it just fires up for a second, runs, and then closes.
Okay, so you have fish activated. You're essentially running in SH or bash, whichever one you have, and then it acts as a middleware. You make a command, it intercepts your command, does whatever with it, and then gives it back to you.
Yes.
Okay.
And the integrations are a little bit deeper than just shell completion. So one of them was sort of module hooks into an actual Python environment. So here's all of the callable modules just kind of sitting there. But yeah, it unlocks a lot.
That is very
let's see. Another big one that I actually didn't put on that list, was stress. So when you're actually building for systems, you need to assume that the system isn't always going to be nice to you. Actually, I am curious if this is going to freeze the stream or not. Stress. Let's see. Let's just run vanilla. So what this actually does is just simulates an extremely greedy process and just sort of eats up the actual CPU time. So one of the big quality assurance things that people do is they run a bunch of these and you kind of find a way to make your code survive through it. Yeah. That has actually been super useful for certain specific programs that we've had around here, such as BigFix, because that's actually disk I/O heavy, and it was taking down quite a few of the applications that I'd written up, and this tool kind of helped me walk through how to actually cut that down a bit. Let's see. Auto SSH. Actually, no, we're not trying to do that yet. One of the little to no preps was this thing. So this is just a normal little GitLab server thing, and it's just kind of how you start it up or do a little hello world for GitLab with Docker, just to kind of tell you what's going on. Error process mounts denied. Oh yeah, you didn't want those, do you? Any other questions while we're waiting for this to erase half of the stuff?
So where did the hacker first throw you into to get your feet wet? Since I know, basically, he was trying to get you to prep you up, you know, building on success on success. What did he start throwing at you first?
Didn't really. To be honest, most of it was just coming in with different things that I had already built, and then he would just sort of point out, so you really, really don't want to do that. And it would just be various reasons of, you know, it's going to crash this way, or you're opening yourself up to serialization by trying to go multi-process, or just various things. And it was just a constant rehashing of different things. Okay. Yeah. A little dysfunctional, but it works. Let's see. Docker. Oh, that's actually living. Yeah, it's living. Okay. So. And to finish up starting up, so what else do we have here? strace, SS, and that actually be a good thing to demo right now. We'll wait for that to finish. So one of the big lessons that we kind of had to go over was how there are different types of randomness on the computer. And sometimes you actually want them for speed of just, you just need something random. You need to shuffle a list or just have some diversity or whatever. And other times you actually need crypto. And one of the big questions that I sort of had was, well, why don't we just use the crypto one for everything? And that's kind of where PV came in. So dev We have urandom and random. What this does, dev. Notice how this isn't moving at all. What this is doing over here, I think. I'm not sure who's eating it right now, but there's basically no randomness coming out of that actual device. So crypto is pretty much broken for anything that decides to pull in that resource right now. So one of the things that,
because of the other processes eating up a lot of.
actually this might be on me, hold on.
I was going to ask, is it because the stress is still running, or?
We turned that off, I think. You don't think you can tail random? There we go. Okay, that was on me. So we don't really know which one is the actual speed one for this, half because I suck at vocab and the other half because you should just test. So one of the things that you do is test the speed, and if they're roughly the same, congratulations, you have a decent source of random, possibly. Well, what you actually need to do, let's see. Tail 200 4 into temp random. Let's see, that's right. And that's actually one of the benefits to PV is if it's just kind of hanging, you don't really know if it's doing anything or not. So it's not actually doing anything. Oh, sorry, head, that's why. This tail is going to wait until the end of the actual file. And if you're doing an endless stream, then it's just going to kind of wait until it ends. So we have 200 bytes of randomness for both random and urandom. So I think we have ent. Oh, yes, we do. Random. And urandom. So what this winds up being for our actual findings is there are different algorithms for estimating randomness. My biggest one is normally seeing how close this gets to pi. Since there was no actual difference between these, I'm getting no cryptographic improvement from using either source. Sometimes it's just because of a bad random number generator. Other times processes are just using it. But yeah, that's kind of how you check if your system is even capable of making randomness. Let's see, are you guys done yet? Yes, you are. So this little container is sitting inside of GitLab. And this is how I would wind up actually seeing what it's actually listening on. So all of these are actually open, and let's see. Okay. Here are all of the ports that are open on the inside. And the thing that kind of sucks about this is for file systems, you have your permissions, but for ports, they're pretty much open to whoever is on that actual box. So if any of these actual processes gets hijacked, they have full reign to just start hitting up the other ones. So even if you do have isolation between the two, you might not actually be safe. What else is on here? SS was not available. I'm actually not sure if Fish will support this, so I'm just going to do this in here. So one of the things that I didn't really know about for the command line is you can have files without files actually existing, because everything in Linux is technically a file. So we have these little inline things, Docker logs f, what is it, GitLab? I spell it wrong?
Well, maybe.
Does not exist. There we go. So on the top half, everything above this is all, I believe, the system log. This, I'm not sure if this is part of the actual Docker container or not, but I definitely know this one is. But what this is actually doing is running this one inline, so you don't have to make a file temporarily and then just sort of tail off that thing. That's actually really useful when you're stuck on a machine that's in read-only, and a lot of the cloud services sort of lock up the actual file system when you've been hijacked. So you wind up needing to know those things. Yeah. Let's see what else was there. S-trace for files. So one of the things that wind up actually needing to know for permissions without just running through root is knowing whether or not you actually need permissions to certain files. So say strace yum update and caret. There's your list of files that you actually need read access to. And for some reason, this is just completely out of the range for a lot of people to just sort of look at. And what winds up happening is they'll just decide, okay, well, we'll just run this thing as root instead of trying to actually get the correct access that we need. And, I wish I'd known about this a long time ago, because not many services actually need root. One of the big lessons that I'd gotten from him was the only thing you truly need root for is to access the CPU's hardware clock, I believe. Everything else can be done as non-root. Yeah.
Again, barely following along with everything that's being saying here, what you're saying basically is that this command that you just ran will show you what permissions you do actually need, so that you can give prime permissions there instead of actually running as root.
So
which actually many more than what you actually want.
Exactly. So if I wanted to have just some updater user, I could give him 0 access to the entire system except for whatever access he's asking for from this output. And he wouldn't be able to do anything else or access anything else other than those specific things. strace is really good for tracking the system calls as well, and that helps lock it down a lot. Systems that have actually implemented that, those are a pain in the butt to get around. So I definitely recommend it. Yes?
The one I have for you is, so you could actually get to the Etsy password or file, even if it's been locked down by root.
Yeah. Let's see if we can actually get there. So this is readable by the entire world. So just pulling that thing out, that's not going to be a problem. What I think he meant was Etsy Shadow, right?
Or yeah. Okay.
For Docker container permissions of none. And the reason why this is actually usable by the system is root doesn't care about actual permissions. It just sort of bypasses the entire thing. So that's why permissions of 000 is just sort of doable for it. Yeah.
So that one is one besides the CPU clock where root would be needed, because everything else does rely on the permissions.
So you can actually have a account administrator user. I've seen that happen before, where its only job was to authenticate the actual user and fire up a shell for it. Just connects to it and it has no other permissions whatsoever.
Okay.
Yeah. What else was there? Auto SSH. How do we do this?
SSH into the Docker image.
Yeah.
You actually, didn't you have multiple Docker images? You had 4 of them, didn't you?
Actually, we're going to do it into the
So which Puppet, Chef, Ansible, which one did you guys end up? I know you guys have played with all of them over the last couple of years.
Mhm.
Which one did you end up finding the most useful?
Python.
Deploying your own.
To be honest, it was either that I keep myself up to date with whatever magical syntax some company decided to actually maintain, or just do a language that's going to have to piss off an entire community in order to change how they operate. And that's kind of been the solid components for any of this system stuff, is just writing the stuff in native Python.
Which I know you've gotten really good at, to the point of, being the repo.
So Python kind of has most of the general system stuff built into its actual OS library. So that's kind of why I stick to it, just because you don't really need to reinvent things. You don't need to run on OS system for just about anything because it already has the tools. Let's see. Actually, just last night, I was trying out it was one of the S3 competitors, and I was seeing how it would do under a stress test. And I kind of forgot about it for a few hours, and the server completely froze up and refused to open any more programs because it just ran out of memory. So what I wound up needing to do was start a Python shell, because that happened to be in the shared memory. And then I had to just sort of wiggle my way out with nothing but the OS. And I think I used os.kill combined with their stat library just to run kill-9 just to a bunch of pits just so I could safely reboot it without losing everything else that was on the server. What else? Did I get into something on here? Auto SSH. What do we have access to? Oh, it's by the way, me showing this on a stream just because this is a public key does not mean that I'm actually safe. Now that I've actually done this, I need to replace this. That was one of the bigger lessons when I was working with him, was most of the crypto that we rely on to, you know, hold people off for 10 some odd thousand years or whatever the hell it is, that's all gone out the window because we can just scale up with the cloud services now. You can just go parallel until it's actually a reasonable amount of time. I think there was a few white papers that was saying you could break just about any SSH key for about $8 grand in AWS. So, yeah.
So what's the defense against that? Like changing it often?
Pretty much just don't rely on sharing it publicly and it just being crypto for it to be enough.
You want to tell them about the big break-in with the library, Rock. I remember where he got his big library of 30,000 passwords.
What have I done?
I've never had a time limit before.
Have we been?
Is it still streaming?
That's record showed publicly to take him down.
Your screen share. Everything else seems.
.sh authorized key. Making sure that there's a SSH server up for this actual thing. And this is the GitLab server, I believe. Or else I'm just going to sign into something else. Who knows? This.
I was referring to the RockU dictionary.
Oh, the RockU TXT.
Yeah.
That's a wonderful one. Yeah. We could go on to
Kelly.
little web demos of stuff because I really don't have time to be doing all that. RockU TXT. So this is a pretty famous list of passwords that, oh boy, that's a little big. This is a pretty famous list of passwords that you can just sort of run over any hash list and just start getting passwords cracked from them. And it's a way to sort of get around needing to brute force an actual system, because if you can just crack it offline and then just come in with the password, then you're fine. And I'm sure this thing's going to open in some ridiculous program. Yeah.
3, 4, 5.
No, you mean password or 0000?
Oh, we're gonna crack password.
You'd be surprised at what the top 10 for this year is. it's been the same thing for the last 20 years. It's just different orders.
Yeah, it's, I mean, a lot of the stuff has just been repeated over and over and over and over. But most of these passwords, to be honest, with programs like Hashcat, most of these passwords would be knocked out within an hour without any problem.
Is that with or without extra resources? Like if you wanted to do that off your Mac, would it work?
We actually did do that off of the Mac when that was first introduced to me, was just finding out how ridiculously easy it was to just crack hashes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That was one of the things for the actual random number generators that really counted. Was some people were thinking, okay, well, if you just hide the hash, it's still encrypted out there, no problem. But if you have a bad source of randomness, then there are programs that can use statistics to just sort of tear that down. So that's kind of why you can't really just trust encryption. Let's see.
I'm impressed you're able to get, adequate resources out of your just, nothing fancy. Here's a machine that was able to go ahead and do that for you.
Yeah, that's kind of one of the things is that they've been doing this for a really long time. So with Moore's Law, you really don't need an insanely fast computer to really match what they wanted back in the day. Yeah.
You want to talk about your Raspberry Pi?
Ah. Oh, God.
Your
Which part of that?
Your little supercomputer.
And
the things that you did with it.
Where should we go with that? So one of the big challenges for I should probably clear that. So one of the things that kind of got me to really get to know the system was trying to fit every single application that I would want to run inside of one of the Raspberry Pi Nano things that has like half a gig or whatever, 1 core, 32 bits. You run into wacky stuff in order to squeeze it down to that level, but then you realize how little the processes actually need to run and how ridiculous the recommended settings are for pieces of hardware when really you could just tell it to cool its shit. Yeah. Let's see, we don't need this running anymore.
So you built yourself a little cluster.
Yes. I actually have a full lab at home. I forgot to open up that port to here for the day. But that was like full CI/CD pipelines for the open source work and just sort of testing out various security things. Actually, if we move over to Kali Linux, although it wasn't trying to get onto the Wi-Fi.
One of my questions is like, we've had, and I think you guys heard this before, we've invited security people in over time to talk to our group. Got to know some compliance people, which are not the same people.
Yeah.
So how do we, in this era of DevOps and that sort of thing, or DevSecOps, as some of the others like to call it, how do we shift that security left when most of our groups don't have someone with your expertise or anyone close to it in our pipelines or in our groups? How can we start to get that information flowing?
For what to actually sort of prepare and everything? Or
just being somewhat aware of some of the things that brought up in the tools, or like, hey, don't do this, or hey, here's a community that you can plug into to kind of, ask questions or be aware of, or any of those types of things.
They don't have the scanners like you guys do, or how you guys have done a lot of testing on, okay, here's all the flaws in a base Docker image.
Mm-hmm.
Giving credit to where credit is due. Do
You said nothing?
you guys use any of the static?
I'm actually trying to pull it up right now. There is a very friendly, well, not very friendly, but there's a pretty well-used free scanner that you can use called Aqua Micro Scanner. Was that a Google project, Sarah? Okay. So, yeah, we will go ahead and paste this into the actual Slack channel. But what I've been doing with this, let's see. And hold on, need the latest version of that. It's only in my backups. What I did was made a little Python script that basically pulls down the actual public container, runs the actual scanner on it, and then sort of spits out the actual scan. And that's been at least a start for how to start scanning containers. And this has actually been pretty universal for sticking onto random OSs as well. Like anything Linux, it'll be happy with. How did you want to be called? I haven't seen this thing in a while. Yeah. And mini IO was clean.
Target image is not defined.
Yeah, I had a Docker file for them. Okay.
Well, at least you point.
Yeah, no, I'll point you to that. I do have it on a gist somewhere. I just can't remember off the top of my head where I put that thing. But actually, the reason for this whole talk is because I'm kind of leaving NASA for a bit to just sort of take a break. And one of the things I'm going to be doing is looking more into the open source security scanners and just trying to make them a lot more streamlined. Because now that I've actually seen the flows that we've done here and the issues that we've been running into, I kind of have a feeling for what we need to have for the actual developer community. I do want you guys to hit me up for various things. Just
don't worry, we'll stay in contact.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate that.
I just realized there's a topic security channel in Slack.
Yes.
And maybe we can let that, maybe publicize that across the dev groups, topic code, and GSFC Dev Developer Group.
Well, there's a containers one.
Yeah, that's not active. I post the most things in there, and I by far don't know a lot about it.
Let's see. This was kind of what auto SSH was supposed to be, although I didn't really have anything to connect to because I've been burning down all the bridges before I leave because I didn't really want my access to get cut off and then any backdoors that I had to still kind of be left open. What? Okay. So anyways, this tool, what this does is if you've done port forwarding with SSH before, this shouldn't be anything new. But for those who don't,
I think it's constructed somewhere.
okay. What this does is it brings ports over to you. So say for this box, Elk Mark IV netops, I was pulling it in, and on my actual local host was bringing in that IP address to actually be able to access it. And the only firewall rule I actually needed was SSH to that box. And what that winds up doing is bringing all of the stuff that has to stay out there into actual local host development and doing it all over SSH lines. So, I mean, it's better than our half-cooked SSL.
So you're in essence spoofing locally to.
I've easily recreated networks within the inside of my laptop just so I could actually have access to things that I shouldn't have persistent access to with this. But yeah.
Is auto SSH the one that's taking
Yeah, that was the thing that kind of pushed me to go to auto SSH instead of just SSH. So if there's any sort of like stress on the network, or if the pipe breaks or something times out, auto SSH will kick in and try to persist those connections and reconnect to the server.
also you look at the logs, like, okay, I think 500 SSH.
Yes, yes, that is true. Though when it is working, you will see one SSH connection for a year, and nothing will really re-happen again because it just sort of stays persistent.
Whole other issue.
Yeah, but I mean, Screen could give you that same the idea of being able to go back and connect to.
If you're willing to go through Screen, yes. The thing that kind of kept me away from Screen and Tmux, even though Marcin tried to sell it just infinitely, was I like my buttons. I like being able to just click my way to God knows how many screens, and this has worked way better in terms of that. Yeah. Trying to think of anything else.
Okay, so what's the dumbest things that you've seen developers do?
Oh God.
Being that you're netops.
Dumbest things that I've seen developers do. Try to subnet. I mean, they're trying. I give them that, because even when you want to, it's not exactly the smartest thing. Trying to redo things that are cooked in to the system, like actual permission schemes or actual DDoS mitigations, or I think whenever I see people shuttling JavaScript around with crypto in there and thinking that since it's in a closed scope, that there's no way that the browser could possibly change that whatsoever. So that's probably around the same range in terms of dumb things that I've seen. Trying to actually correct them on that has been difficult because a lot of the things just sort of move more towards areas that developers can more happily work in. I mean, this whole serverless side, it really works out well for us programmers if we don't know how to use the system. For someone like me who actually would like to see what the system is doing and would like to know how I can actually improve the code so it works with the system better, it blinds me. And
black box.
yes. So yeah. Anything else?
How many people do you have on the channel?
There's quite a few actually. We
Any
have more
questions?
online than we have here.
Oh yeah, does the channel have any questions, I guess? That should definitely be asked.
Who has one?
Is there a way we can see that?
Questions, answers, yeah.
Okay.
Since you left the opportunity open to reach out to you later.
Yeah.
Can I take it back?
It's recorded, it's online.
What else was
I know I will probably be reaching out with questions at some point.
Yeah.
I'm just starting my ill-advised venture over to this side of things. To help on the development side.
Mhm.
To get a slightly better understanding of these things.
Well, you're kind of in the perfect position to sort of ask, what are you being hung up by right now?
The most basic of things, and that's, you can kind of tell based on a lot of times the dev group is the topics are related to what speakers I could find, but also what problems I'm running into.
Yeah.
So the next week's topic is the basics of Linux, because we now have one of our projects, most of our projects are Windows, but now we're moving over to the Linux space. And I don't even know how to navigate. Like when you mentioned that that tool fish, I immediately wrote it down. I'm like, oh, this is somewhat what I need. But even then, it's like you kind of know the command, and you're trying to figure out what the options are or whatever the case may be. But you still have to know the command up front. But it's still useful. Like right now, we're trying to deploy a container with our image to Linux. Seems like it should be relatively simple, but the developer that's there wants to add a agent to the server in order to deploy there. And I'm like, I'm running that through. Actually, I started to write the email. Our SA team said, hey, I don't know what this is going to do, so I want to make sure it's okay with you guys that we add this agent there to help us do deployments. Not sure if there's I know there's probably a better way. I'm not sure what the implications are for the way that the developer asked to do it. But again, kind of walking in a lot of these things blind. But some of the things that you mentioned about how do you check to see what the open ports are and how do you do these sorts of things, those are the type of things we were probably looked at on the other end, but now like knowing the tools say, hey, here's some basic general things that you should look out for. So as you're walking into this world and you don't really know exactly what it is, that you can at least be somewhat aware of the questions to ask, so to speak.
Yeah. Let's see. Is this the CentOS? No, this is CentOS. Okay. One last thing before we head out. Install Python. RSVP 7, or whatever they can give me. 5.
One of our struggles are when you have different people with different skill sets, right? But from a high level perspective, they don't necessarily see those things. They're like, oh, we need a developer, we need a SA person. Even when I think you'll see, I think you'll see the video later. Have that diversity in IT thing coming up, and my perspective on it is diversity of thought, diversity of skills, that sort of thing. Now it's going to be our slant on that whole diversity thing. But when I've sat in on a few interviews, and they basically want a carbon copy of what they already had, and so we don't end up with a Cody type person, right? With 3 devs and an SA.
Yeah.
That's done. The SA work exactly the same, or the dev work pretty much the same, because they don't want to necessarily rock the boat of have in play. So it becomes hard to kind of convince them that we need this in between that they've never heard of before. Don't necessarily see the value of because it's not.
Mm. So the question is how to sort of convince them that they need this, or?
So twofold. I think we have to move people that we have on staff more, like move them more towards this from the SA side or the dev side. And how do we get the skills to get them there? I think once we start showing value, when the people we have on staff move towards that, say, hey, now we can show the value of it. We can actually get someone in, ask more to focus on that. Like, here's what we've done with the limited knowledge we have. But also, if we, like I said, that's why I just joined the security channel. But I hope I can find other people like this, where I can point to other groups and say, this group has this person, and this is how their value added to their group. Because I can't necessarily speak the language. I'm having a hard time formulating the comment here. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I get what you mean. So one of the big channels that has been a lot of help on NASA space has been topics/sysadmin.
Yeah.
So they've been really friendly with just full-on stupid questions.
I've asked quite a few of mine.
Yeah.
They're myself.
And they've been pretty good at like sort of guiding us towards the right direction in terms of trying to ask for someone who you don't really know whether or not you need. I mean, it's kind of the other side of a double-edged sword, where you have other groups who don't know how to find people who they don't know how to describe. Yeah. So I'm not really too sure about that for actual recruiting for that stuff.
It sounds like what you want is a jack of all trades compared to someone who's all I'm going to do is Python, or all I'm going to do is Windows development, and they're not willing to play in all of the different fields.
Well, it's also a challenge of the particular teams hiring who they want to choose. So the idea of we want someone with a cultural fit. Or people tend to hire people that know just slightly less than exactly what they know.
I can't think why talk.
There's really great articles on it.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
That
Amazon works on it a lot. How do you get, because people don't want to hire someone that intimidates them. They don't want to hire someone that's different from them. And
so the way I've heard it described, and I kind of like it, is you have A people hire other A people, so they want to work with the best. B people hire C or D people. They don't want to be outshined. And so you end up with this perpetual thing of like hiring down, because you think the person that you're going to bring in is going to somehow supplant you. So therefore they just like, well, if we have a candidate, are we done online? I think we're